Okay, so I'm recording now. So I'm just going to do a brief introduction. This is obviously Kris Spaulding. She's the co-owner of Brewery Vivant in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She is a graduate of University of Michigan. She got her BS in environmental policy and behavior, and she got her MBA from Grand Valley State University, which is outside of Grand Rapids. The sustainability director, also of Brewery Vivant. She is responsible primarily for everything related to sustainability at the brewery. She was responsible for getting the LEED certification and is, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were also responsible for obtaining the B Corporation certification.
Oh yeah.
Okay, which I know can be a little bit of work obtaining that and retaining it. And I will open up the floor to you, Kris.
Okay. Well, just like to go off of that a bit. So the way that, as a triple bottom line focused business, the way my husband and business partner and I separate things is my job is the people and the planet, and his job is the profit. So he makes sure the product, meets all of our needs. He has the brewing background, and then, my passion is more around, what is our sustainability story and our impact, positive and negative, on the world around us. So that takes a lot of different forms, and I'm sure that's what we'll get into tonight. My background prior to opening the brewery, though, was at Herman Miller. I was there for about 12 years. I started in working with our dealers, and then I was a product manager for the very exciting filing and storage products, so all the metal boxes that you're familiar with. And then my last job was in design for environment, so that was awesome because that was what I actually wanted to be doing. It's just hard to find those positions. But working on the sustainability team and making sure the products met our environmental protocol, which required a lot of talking with suppliers and negotiating them, sharing their information with us, and then working with the project design teams to make alterations to the products so they were more environmentally responsible. So everything I learned working with office furniture, I was able to apply to beer, which may not seem logical, but the structure of how we did things at Miller was pretty awesome. The company had a strong commitment to sustainability, right? Hopefully you've all heard of them and understand the impact that they had. But what we did right when we started working on our business plan at Vivant was make sure that all of the sustainability aspects were baked in. So, our original packet we gave to investors, like right at the beginning, there's the 3 things we want to do using our Venn diagram. So the one part was Belgian and French inspired beers. The next part was pairing that with food. And then the third part was operating sustainably. The way we hold ourselves accountable to that from the very beginning, we basically did like a materiality assessment and looked at what do we think our impacts, positive and negative, will be as a brewery. And then based on what we believed those would be, then we set our original goals, which I think we had like 14 goals originally. And then, my plan was to every year report on how we're doing on those in a public report and use that as the way to hold ourselves accountable and to continue forward. So that all I learned at, with office furniture at Herman Miller, but very much applicable to any product. And that process itself, I think has worked out really well for us as we've matured. We opened in 2010. So as we've matured as a company, I've understood, which goals just weren't good goals. Maybe they weren't measurable, or they were less relevant than we thought they'd be. So we've evolved what those look like over time, and I'm looking forward to probably next year. 2020 will be our 10-year anniversary. I'm hoping to like take a big step back and get with some of the other people within the area that are really champions of sustainability and very knowledgeable about the future, whether that's in my industry or outside of it, and kind of hit like a reset button and see, you know, what's that next thing. I think we're doing a good job measuring now, but I think we need to be pushing more into maybe innovation in certain ways, whether that's like physical equipment innovation or innovation in how we're engaging with the community or whatever. So that's kind of where we've been and where we're going. Just a couple other things is, you know, business, we're pretty small. We're about $5 million revenue. 2/3 of that is within 2/3 of our beer we sell within our pub, and then we have, you know, the other third that goes out into the market. So we just distribute within Michigan for the most part, a small amount here and there. Our goal has always been to stay small, and that was important to us as a husband and wife doing this together. And then on top of opening our business, we also had a first kid 9 days after we opened. So knowing that we needed to create like a solid balance of wanting to be together and not be traveling all the time, continuing to try to grow the business was really important. So that's worked out pretty well. Our original goal was to hit 5,000 barrels, and we are there now, though I think we'd like to grow a little bit more now that we kind of see what 5,000 feels like. But we, you know, take a lot of pride in the small giant kind of mentality. I don't know if you guys have read that book, but it's such a great book. The small giants their definition of small is a little bit different than ours. You know, they look at New Belgium Brewery, for example, as a small giant, which is true if you compare it to someone like Unilever or GE or GM. But obviously, compared to us, you know, that's pretty giant size. Anyway, that's kind of the gist of what we're all about, kind of where we've been and where we're going. Maybe I'll just stop there. I think that's enough intro.
Sure. So I guess at this point then we can open up the floor to questions. I will take the first question because I already mentioned this about the B Corp certification.
Yeah.
For the people who don't know, it's similar to LEED certification in that it's a third-party certification. You also have what's called a benefit corporation, which is a legal status in various states if the state has that. The earning that certification can be costly, it can be a lot of work. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about some of the steps that you took to obtain that certification and what benefits you've seen from having that certification.
Yeah, so we've been certified since 2013. So what I like about it is kind of like Justin was saying, it's like LEED certification, right? Except where LEED is very focused on your physical environment and your building. B looks at everything about your business and your impact on all your stakeholders. So customers, suppliers, employees, investors, the earth. I think that's, and then your like greater community. So it's a pretty rigorous process. It's a couple hundred questions that you audit basically yourself, and you know, very much telling as far as what you're doing and what you're not doing. And that was when I first looked at it, as I knew about it from being at Herman Miller, who's at the time, it wasn't intended for publicly traded companies, and now they're changing that. But when I first took the assessment, it was about a year into our business. It's a totally free and open to anyone who's interested in looking at it and going through it. I did it more as a way to see, you know, we have this structure that we've built and baked into the company, and now we've been around for a year and have been implementing it. But knowing that you only know what you know, and there's always people that know more than you, it was a really good way to open my eyes up to what was outside of my definition of sustainability that I needed to pull into it, right? So things that impacted me the most within that were our safety programs. So there's quite a few bits on safety and how your company has that structured as a program. And we honestly just didn't have a solid program in place. So it helped me to think through, some of the steps I needed to take in order to get there. And, other things too, they actually, in trying to help us all be financially sustainable, they also have some really good processes they ask about related to your financial security as a company. So how do you share your financial metrics and who has access to your banking and accounting and invoicing and all of those things. So I think that was one of the best benefits just right out the bat, right before we were even certified, was just seeing what we weren't doing and where we could improve. And then once we actually decided to pursue the certification, there's a lot of, our area has a good amount of B Corps for being, relatively small. I think maybe there's like 16 or 17 now. So we have this nice network of B Corp businesses that get together and share, what's working and not working. We're all from different industries. So there's not necessarily a product sharing, although I do share a lot of beer. But what's awesome to me is here's all these business owners who have similar values. And if I have a challenge I'm working through, I have these other 16 people I can call and say like, hey, we're in this sticky situation, whatever it may be. And they're not going to assume, like I think a typical business owner would be, that like money is my number one priority. So that's been a really great network to have and to be a part of. And then it, extends internationally. So I've met some really cool people from companies throughout the world that I've been able to pull on when, I have questions or want best practices or whatever. So it is a rigorous process. It takes a good amount of time. You have to recertify every 3 years now. And then the cost to be certified is a kind of a sliding scale. So it's manageable. I think they actually have it pretty good. So it's affordable, but you still have to put, a certain amount into it. But it's been a great tool to keep us moving forward, keep us redefining sustainability within how they evolve the certification process itself. But then also, grow our network of values-aligned businesses. So that's been good. And I mean, my favorite part is that we have to recertify. Like, that's my biggest complaint with LEED. We're the first commercial microbrewery that was ever LEED certified, and that was 2012 that we got that certification. And then we're done, and no one ever checks up on you and makes sure that you're still doing good things. And I think all the people at USGBC understand that that's a limitation they have, and probably something they wrestle with. But I really like that continuous accountability from, just keeping us growing, but also to the customer base, so they know they can continue to trust that we're doing what we say we're doing. I'm curious if anyone else has B Corp related questions. Oh, and one other quick point. Michigan doesn't have the benefit corporation legal structure yet, so we are not one of those.
Yeah, that's correct.
Sadly.
Donna, did you have a question?
Not about B Corp, so I can wait a little bit.
Okay. Does anybody else have a question? Cheyenne, Josh? Let me take Josh off here. Okay, well,
not right now. I've got little kids about to go to bed, so I'm running around while listening. I apologize.
Okay, not a problem. I do have another question for you then.
Yeah.
I'm a Michigan native. We are blessed in Michigan with a lot of water. We touch 4 Great Lakes. We have, very deep aquifers. What is your philosophy on managing and protecting our water supply? Because I'm sure you're aware we have some controversies here in Michigan.
Very true. So our role in it, we just use Lake Michigan water is what our beer is made from. So thankfully it tests out pretty well for us. And then, it's on us to return it to through the wastewater treatment system, in a solid way. And I feel good about the things we have in place for our actual water usage and limiting it. And then making sure that we're, not using chemicals more than we should. But where I think we come into play more with water is, living in this area, people totally take water for granted and, feels like we have this endless supply and we're always going to have this healthy water ecosystem, which is, I get why people think that, but I also know enough to know that that's not true. And there's some pretty good books written about, what did I just read recently? Like something about the death of the Great Lakes. But anyway, so my point is, I think it's important to advocate for good water policy at the local and state and national levels. That's something that I think as a business, whether it's right or not, the way things work in our country is people listen to businesses more than they listen to others. Quite often, we get handed a microphone a lot more often than we should. And if a business person is saying something is important next to a nonprofit organization with all the expertise, I think people are going to feel more compelled to listen to the business person because we have a capitalistic society that we're part of. So I like to use that voice and that spotlight that we're given, especially as a brewer. It's a sexy industry to the media, so they give us the spotlight, the microphone more often than I would expect other businesses to get. So it's kind of a long answer, but I think as far as water, using our voice to advocate for good policies and to get behind our people in our government that are doing things to try to protect the integrity of the lakes is really important.
Okay. I'm going to keep going with these questions until somebody interrupts me, basically. So, because I did have a chance to visit your brewery and I did talk with KSP, I think how you referred to her. And when I talked with her, she had nothing but great things to say about you guys and working at Brewery Vivant. I know that you guys donate 1% of your sales to nonprofits. Is that correct still?
Yep.
Okay.
Always cool.
Yep. Can you talk about some of the causes that you donated to, the criteria that you use to pick the causes that you donate, and whether you've seen and what kind of impacts you've seen from your donations?
Yeah, that's like my favorite part of my job, and that has been an evolution too. As we've lived in Holland, which is only a half hour from Grand Rapids, but a totally different community. So when we opened, a lot of the nonprofit scene was new to us. So we kind of spread the, gift card love is what it started out as, right? Everyone wants gift cards for auctions or prizes or whatever. We spread it out pretty thin, and then as we got to know the nonprofits in the area that aligned with the causes that were important to us, we've built some really long-lasting partnerships, which is pretty awesome. So our main ones right now, we try to align, a good amount with what is the nature of our business. So our restaurant being the biggest part of the business, that's makes food a very natural partner. So there's an organization around here that it's called Kids Food Basket, and it's one that noticed, that there's a lot of kids in this area that get the free school breakfast and lunch, but then they would go home and not have food at home necessarily. So this organization sends them home with sack suppers. So that's our biggest partner. It's probably about a quarter of our giving goes to them, sponsoring our neighborhood school and making sure that all the kids that are within our neighborhood get a dinner that they can take home after school each day. And then there's other, food related ones. There's some cool urban gardening groups that I think are trying to help people see that, you can still have gardens when you're in the middle of the city, and get access to fresh vegetables if you're supporting them. And then we also look at water, given that it's the majority of our input with beer. So partnering with some environmental organizations focused on, water cleanliness and policy. And then just the natural environment in general. There's a lot of parks in Grand Rapids. We have an organization called Friends of GR Parks that's trying to increase our tree canopy to the mayor's goal, which is 40%. So we planted a lot of trees, which I think, offers so many benefits. And those are really fun things. So we do this 1% of sales go to nonprofits, but we partner that with a goal around volunteer hours. So this last year, I think our goal was 350, and we ended up with, what did we have? Almost 450 volunteer hours just from our staff out in the community. So we're always making sure that who we donate to, they also are in their space, and as a staff, we know, really what's behind the organizations and how we can help outside of just money. And then, there's a lot of other little things that we partner with, different outdoor education kind of groups. And Grand Rapids is a cool city. It's been through quite a transition recently, which means we also attract a lot of homeless people because there's a lot of great services here. So that's another opportunity where, there's some cool homeless advocacy organizations that are trying to do things differently. West Michigan is a very religious area, so a lot of the shelters here view that like being a mission. In addition to housing you, they want to share their religion with you, which I think is, fine for some people, but not fine for others. So we've been supporting the groups that have been more on the sidelines because they're not religiously motivated. And maybe they're less funded that way because of that. And then my other favorite partner is our public school system. So, our school system had just been terrible through too many transitions of superintendents. And then right around the time that we opened, we had a superintendent that took over and has really been transforming this urban school district into something to be proud of, and we've been a part of that. So like some things we've seen with that are the school that we sponsor the SAC suppers with, we also, they wanted to have like soccer after school, and they had no budget to buy soccer balls or soccer nets. So, little things, right? Like $200 later, we buy them some nets and some balls, and now all of a sudden all these kids are out playing soccer after school. So it's fun to see like across the street what our impact is with these kids. And then, that school specifically has also transformed quite a bit over time as their leadership has stabilized and teachers have stayed, and test scores are going up, and it's actually where our kids go to school now, which is pretty cool. So it's fun to have these partnerships that are so long lasting and that hit our family in different ways as well as our business.
Awesome.
Yeah. And Kate's kids go there too, by the way.
That's awesome. I guess along those lines, you mentioned the volunteering. When I had the opportunity to talk with Kate, and I looked at your website, obviously, the way you treat your employees, the benefits that you offer. I saw that, I did see that, your average pay is above the living wage for the Grand Rapids area, which is a great thing. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that you've had on your retention of employees, the employee productivity, the morale? I think you see what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think all that stuff, it makes so much sense, right? To us, it just makes like we want our employee base to feel like an extension of our family, and for us to feel that way to them and them to feel that way for each other. So I think my goal is I'd like them all to be happy. So what does that look like, right? So we've offered, traditional for office environments, but non-traditional for restaurants, if you look at that as the biggest part of our company, types of benefits. So, good medical care and all those kind of things, and disability, retirement sharing or retirement planning, where we do a company match, things like paid time off that, again, if you're in an office, these are all like very normal, but it's hard to find restaurants that are willing to invest in their staff that way. I think that typical restaurant turnover rate's like 100%. We're at like 40-something% on average. If you look at, a bunch of years kind of averaged out, which feels about right to me, as we do have a certain amount of like college students that are using the job as a transition point. But then we have a lot of people that are in it for the long haul, and this is the career they've chosen, and those are the ones we want to keep, right? So we've seen, I think we have 6 or 7 employees who have been with us from the first day we opened, which is awesome, because I think we only had about 30 employees at that time. And so we've seen them get married and have babies, and as our staff has matured and in their lives and what they're doing, we've seen where we needed to support them more. So that was the biggest instigation for us to offer medical outside of just our salaried people, was seeing how much it costs to have babies, right? And then and seeing if you don't have health care and you make just enough money, you're not getting the government support. So, and what do you do? So anyway, it's pretty awesome, right, to know that we're making a difference in our employees' lives, and for the most part, they are more satisfied at our place. And we're at a point now, so it's been 8.5 years, and we're starting to see people that left and then, pursued something else, moved away, whatever, and then they're starting to come back. So even if they're only back for a little bit while they resettle back into the area if they've moved, I love that they're coming back, because that, says a lot to us that it wasn't just like a pass-through time. It had some good meaning to them to be part of this family that we've created. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I kind of wish I loved my job that much.
They don't all love their job. Let me tell you, I do a satisfaction survey every year, and there's always a couple people that I wonder why they still work at our place if they're so unhappy. And I try to point that out in our company meetings. So there's a couple of you that maybe it seems you should get with the manager you're most comfortable with and talk about what's not working for you. Anyway.
Can I jump in there?
Sure, absolutely.
So first of all, I appreciate what you were saying about the lead process. I work for a giant company on a pretty large corporate campus, supporting them through facilities management. And I've seen that we are lead platinum on one part of the campus, but since we opened, there's nothing. Now, both our client and our company are really compelled to ensure that we're still meeting those deadlines, and we do internal audits, but I'm surprised that that doesn't exist for the certification. So my question for you actually is around, you said that you focus on people and planet, and I think that's awesome, but as a small business owner, is there a situation in which you've had a conflict between profit and those other P's?
Oh, always, right?
So how do you prioritize or reconcile that when you still have to pay the bills?
Yeah, it's a challenge. What we always say, especially to staff, is in our decision-making process, right? We make sure we're looking through all those lenses. So that doesn't mean that every time the people in the plan are going to win. Sometimes you have to go with the cheaper option, or whatever it may be. So right now is I think a good example where our industry has grown so much and so quickly that there's somewhat of a saturation within our market that we're experiencing. So our financials aren't as good as they used to be. So now we're having the discussion of, really you have to be financially sustainable first in order to exist and be able to do anything else. So as we're finding ourselves, with less budget available to spend on perks and things that are, less traditional ways of spending your money as a business, how are we going to balance? Where do we cut a budget, right? Do we shrink our benefits in order to get ourselves where we need to be financially, or do we cut a couple people, or do we say, you know what, we're all about spending local, but we know if we use this online printer, we're going to be able to get, whatever it is that we're trying to get printed for a fraction of the cost than if we use the local printer. So we haven't made those decisions yet, but we're going through this process. We actually have a big meeting next week with our management team to say, here's the reality, and we all have to reduce our spending. Here's the things that we're going to be doing as owners, on the higher level. But how do we all reconcile that balance with cost and wanting to satisfy our desire to be a triple bottom line company? So it's a lot easier to spend money on the cool stuff when we're feeling profitable. It's a lot harder, right, when we're seeing the need to hold on to our cash a lot more. So it's a spot we haven't really been in yet. So I'm ready to get out of it, right? But we'll see. We have to do some course corrections.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have another question then. Regarding, this might touch upon what you actually just mentioned. Regarding the inputs for your brewing process and for the restaurant part of your business, there's a new focus lately on regenerative agriculture and other forms of farming that really protect the environment, but the products that you buy may end up costing more than your traditionally raised meat products or traditionally grown food products. So I'm wondering, do you incorporate, or are you planning on incorporating, for example, organics or regeneratively produced organics into your menu and in your brewing process?
I think as far as our food suppliers, one of our biggest spends is on beef, because we sell so many burgers. We sell like almost 20,000 burgers a year. So we do all of that with the local farm called Wernette Farm, which is just up the way, I don't know, a half hour, 40 minutes. And they're actually in a study right now with MSU who's looking at cattle farming and how to make it a regenerative soil scenario, which is awesome. So, we're choosing partners to work with that have these values, right? And it costs us more money to buy that local beef, but we know that, like, I feel good serving that burger on my menu and knowing that that cow is humanely treated and they are, actively pursuing how to be the best farmer they can be within their industry, to the point of being, a pilot study spot for some of these different techniques that are being tested out. I think that just started maybe in the fall. So, and I forget how long the study is, but I'm excited to see how that goes. And then, we can use the platform of having a busy restaurant to share the results of what happened in that study and have it be a learning experience. So we have some partnerships that I think are already thinking like that. I think a lot of Michigan's such an agriculturally rich and diverse economy that there's a lot of good thought going into top growing and grain growing hasn't happened quite as much as hops as far as the industry, but there's been some really cool, again, like programs that our different hop growers have used, looking at more natural methods of, like pesticide reduction. So there's one of our hop farms we work with, spent some time in New Zealand where they use sheep to get rid of invasive species and whatever with keep their hop plants cleaner. So for a while they were testing out, like, would that work in Michigan? So they had a bunch of sheep all over their farm, and they actually did a good job, like, cleaning up the hop plants, but I think the sheep themselves were maybe a little more challenging to manage than they had intended, so they don't have them anymore. But those are like the partners that we're looking for, right? So when I look at what is that next phase of sustainability for us, I think this is the type of conversation we'll be having more often with more suppliers. But it is a cost, right? Like, to be an early adopter and supporter of organizations that are doing things, non-traditionally, where you're not sure how the results are going to look. We can only do so much of that and take the risk, I suppose, of partnering. But we do try to do that where we can. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in our world for better practices. We also focus more on, is it locally produced than is it organically produced, for example. So in our hierarchy, I put local organic would be first, and then local, and then organic.
Okay. I guess, to follow on to what you were just mentioning about about Michigan and our agricultural heritage and, what we're able to produce, I'm an energy and sustainability policy major. So if I went the whole discussion without mentioning climate change, I think my advisor might have some words for me. So, on the issue of climate change, we here in Michigan, we're experiencing it, particularly up north in Traverse City area where they grow the cherries, along the western edge of Michigan, where there are the wineries. Have you noticed any impacts, with your suppliers? And I know that, here in Michigan, we do grow hops. We don't produce nearly as much as the Pacific Northwest, but we do have our share. Is this something on your radar?
I don't know how many of them have been impacted yet. I think, it's more like the impacts that our local suppliers see is more when there's like those late frosts, which may or may not be climate change related, right? So I think that piece of it hasn't hit the state so much, but as an industry, we're definitely seeing an impact, especially with grain production and where you can grow grain. And I mean, it's moving further north. And I think I feel like, so the Brewers Association's our trade organization, and they fund different studies to try to see, recognizing climate change is a real thing. There's no one in Michigan, I don't think, but different farms that are looking for barley crops and varieties that can weather the climate change storm better. So there's some good work being done with that, but I think it's pretty initial. But like something that I think related to climate change that I'm excited about that we're working on is our CO2 recapture. So, when you ferment beer, you create a lot of CO2. That's just a natural product, and big breweries capture it and are able to use it in different ways, but there hasn't been technology for small breweries to do that yet. And we're the pilot for a local entrepreneur who's focusing on breweries like our size and a little bit bigger, to take our CO2 from fermentation and clean it up, and then we can use it, in the different ways that we use CO2 in-house, and then actually sell the excess that we create. So rather than continuing to create CO2 for the point of purging tanks or whatever, and us having to buy that, we're now going to be cycling through it ourselves. So that's pretty cool. And I think, the potential is there's so many small breweries now for that technology to have a bigger impact within our small industries. It has a lot of potential. And I think he has the best solution. There's a few different companies working on this, but so those are the things we try to put our name out there that, hey, we're interested in this stuff. And then the entrepreneurs find us and, and we become a guinea pig, but I like it.
That's awesome. Cheyenne, Donna, any questions? So I can keep going.
No, unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to dip out just a little bit early. I was still the work day here in Seattle, so
yeah.
Got a few fires to put out. Thank you for your time, Kris. I really appreciate you joining us.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us, Donna. I do have another question then. I saw that you produce, is it 10%, 11% of your energy on site?
Yeah, I think it was 11.5% last year. Okay. 192 solar panels.
Are you going to be incorporating renewable energy into your new location as well?
Yeah, I hope to. I think the way we did this project was, we basically used a bank loan to do the project. Our payback period's probably 10 years before it starts to, turn into the positive, which is, kind of long. And a lot of my non-values aligned business friends don't understand why we would do a project like that. But what I'm looking at now, our new facility is, like a giant warehouse with a big flat roof. So at the point when we know we have to replace the roof, which, I'm sure will happen within the next 5 years, my intent is to partner with someone that's doing more of like a community solar, where we can provide the right surface without having to invest in, the purchasing all the equipment and putting the panels up and all of that, but allowing to grow the renewable portfolio of the area. That's my theory. We'll see. We'll see how long this roof goes. There's already a leak, so nothing like a heavy rain to teach you more about your building than you wanted to know.
Well, that's awesome. Here in Michigan, people often discount solar and wind, because we do get a lot of cloud cover. I think people don't realize that. They produce a lot. They still produce. The sun still comes through the clouds. It's just not as bright.
Yeah.
Essentially. So I guess going back to your food menu, if you have more time, I have never seen a restaurant do this. Have you ever considered meatless Mondays?
That has come up a bit. I don't think we'd ever go meatless, just because the burger is like our thing but the two things we're most known for, right, is burger and duck nacho. Yeah. So we are, though, trying to put more items on the menu that are vegan friendly. There's quite a big vegan scene here in GR, and they always let us know when they're not happy with what's on our menu. And our menu changes a lot, so it's good to get that feedback. And then when we do the next change or when we do specials, we try to make sure that if something isn't vegan, and it can be, that we communicate that. Or if it's, starts out vegan and people want meat, you can usually just add it. But that's something that I went to the chefs with earlier this year and just said, I know how much you guys like meat, and we're a very meaty restaurant. We need to start working in this other direction too. And they surprised me, and they were like, yeah, we were thinking that too. They're like, whoa, I thought this was going to be a battle. And they were in, especially going into summer, right? It's a lot easier to show off all that local produce.
So cycling back to your employees and how you treat your employees and how they feel about you guys. Do you offer any incentives? I know that some companies do this. The company that I work for does this. Incentives for employees who manage to reduce waste or come up with programs or different ways of doing things that increase profitability?
Within the company?
Yes.
We don't have any incentive programs around that, no. But we do offer them incentives to be better at home, which, those kind of go hand in hand, right? So if they work through this program and they get so many points, then they get some like gift cards to local places. So we try to help them out in that way through the program being somewhat of an educational thing. But within the business operating, I think we haven't incentivized people yet.
Okay.
We talked about it, right? Like if it's a cost savings, how do you measure that and what kind of incentive can you give and can you do a percent or whatever? But so far that hasn't been a scenario.
Okay. I'm running through my questions here. Is there, by the way, the book that you had mentioned earlier, the Death and Life on the Great Lakes?
Yeah.
Is one I've recently finished that one as well. It was a great book.
Yeah.
Read a lot of books about water and energy. Just being a student here, kind of have to sometimes. Is there anything that you think, anybody who is interested in going into the brewing or restaurant industry should know in advance of trying to do what you guys are doing?
Well, I'd say right now, no one should open any more breweries. There's just so many. We've more than tripled, almost quadrupled as an industry since we opened in 2010, which is like hard to wrap my head around. But I think there's a lot of breweries and restaurants to some extent that are as far as sustainability goes, it's a natural fit to be a craft brewery with an inclination towards community, to build sustainability into your structure. But what I hear most from people is like they want to do good things and they don't know where to begin, and it's that initial overwhelming moment and it stops them. So I always tell people look at what are where are your employees passionate about, or what are you passionate about, or where do you think you have the biggest waste issues, and just tackle one thing one thing at a time. And to the point of, if someone were trying to get into the industry as a employee, right, like when you bring that passion with you wherever you go, like that's what employers need. But whatever your passion may be, right, we need people that are excited to come in and try new things and push the company in different directions, and it's all good stuff.
Okay. And then one more question from me, following up, along that line. You were named in 2016 one of the 50 most influential women in Michigan, or was it West Michigan?
Yeah, like a West Michigan thing.
West Michigan. Have you ran into any difficulties being a woman trying to get financing, or really being a leader within West Michigan?
I don't think so. I think it's a pretty supportive community for women leaders. And there's financing, because we're 50% male and 50% female owned, right? So that hasn't really been a factor as far as I know. But I think there's a lot of good support out here. A lot of women celebrating women, which my husband doesn't understand. Like, why do you need all these groups? And why do you all get together so much? Like, well, you just don't understand, dude. You're just a white guy. And he won't understand, and that's totally fine.
Okay.
But yeah, I think, if you look at craft, is pretty male dominated. Like, I've seen being female in a leadership position within the industry, I think has done more help than it has harm, for sure, because there's somewhat of a shiny object thing to it, right? Like we've gotten some good press through being part female owned and focused on sustainability, and we somehow, my husband and I made it on the cover of our trade magazine, which is a national publication. And I think it's because of all these factors, that could be a barrier or they could be awesome, right? And I think people are wanting to support each other more now. Maybe not in politics, but in other ways.
Well, this is Michigan. We're not a West Coast state, but it's still, I know that Grand Rapids is an up and coming area, so
yeah. So
congratulations on that.
Nice to be. Thanks.
So I don't have any more questions. Cheyenne, do you have any questions? Josh?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm still like formulating it, so it might kind of be not great. But just the idea of like opening a business in a community that might not be as receptive to sustainability. Like I'm from a really small town in Pennsylvania where people don't care about that kind of thing. Like it's not on their radar at all. And just wondering like how you can make that work in a place where people aren't caring, or how you can make them care a little bit more when they're older, established, and really, set in their ways.
It sounds like when I talk to my family.
Yeah, same.
Oh my gosh, my family, like they just like have no concept of what it is I'm doing in many ways. It becomes like a thing where they like make fun of it, like what? So I don't bother talking to people, that obviously have a shield in front of them that you're not going to get through. But I'm happy to talk to anybody who's actually willing to listen. And I think it's just sharing. Like, there's always a balance with how you market your business, right? Like, if you're always marketing your values, like, people don't want to hear about your values mostly, they want to hear about your product. So you have to like sneak in the values within the product message. And I think through that, you can open more doors by speaking the language that is more familiar to people. So a good example, another brewery in town, they had someone who wanted to instigate more sustainable practices at their brewery, and she came and was talking to me like, how can I convince my owners to do this stuff? Like, well, if you're talking about environmental stuff, it's efficiency, right? And anytime you're talking about efficiency, that means you're saving money or you're spending less money or whatever. And you start talking on those benefits that are like real financial benefits or reduced turnover as far as the employee things. And that's something that other, people relate to. If they hear the word sustainability, they're going to be turned off. But if you start talking about saving money or making more money, then you can kind of bring them around a little bit more. So I think that's just like a fact on at least how to initiate conversation. Because I don't think, if you said, oh, it's going to cost you more money to do this, you're not going to sell anybody. But okay, maybe it'll cost you more up front, but look at long term, you're going to save for the next 15, 20 years. Like, sharing those models makes a big difference. And that's one of our faults that we have, is that we don't model things enough when we make decisions. We do a lot more gut and heart choices. And sometimes the financials end up not being as good as we had hoped they would be because we're trusting our instincts a little bit too much. But so we need a little more rigor. Yeah.
So Josh has some questions for you if you've got a little bit more time.
Sure.
Yeah. Hi. Sorry, I was muted and off camera, kind of handling my kids in the background. So you may have covered some of this already, but I wondered specifically what your kind of next goals are in terms of sustainability. I've seen your website, your reports, your annual reports, but kind of what are your next goals personally not necessarily fitting the B certification criteria, but from personally, what would you like to see next within the business related to sustainability?
Yeah, I think I'm going to spend a good amount of time, hopefully in the next year, kind of working on what does that next phase look like. But there's a couple of things, we want to get behind sooner versus later. And one is just that innovation piece, right? So how do we continue to innovate as a small craft brewery in a way that's helpful and can be replicated elsewhere, as far as equipment and whatnot. So trying to find that next partner once we have our CO2 recapture thing fully out there. And then I think the other big piece is on the community side. We have a lot of these really cool partnerships that I talked about a little bit, and they're awesome. But we've looked at narrowing that scope more. So saying like, instead of partnering with maybe a dozen in a strong way, what if we just partner with still that maybe that many, but all focused on a similar outcome, right? So look at like education as like, to me, that's one of the biggest opportunities for any community is investing in your kids. Because those are the kids that are going to be running the community, 10, 20 years from now. And there's still so much disparity within Grand Rapids, and, like that historical segregation is really pretty deep rooted, and we need to work on that more. So that's something I've been looking at is, can we shift our partnerships to try to have more impact on a specific issue? And I don't know, we're small enough that I don't know how much impact we can have and really move needles. But, again, with being a sexy business, if we get behind something and we tell others about it and we can bring more people with us through a compelling story and showing, what the benefits to the community would be, I think that could be pretty awesome. But I'm not quite ready yet I still have to work through that.
Okay, fair enough. And then in terms of achieving the B certification, what did you find to be the biggest challenge? I think you had at least hinted at that. Again, I wasn't able to hear all of it, kind of bits and pieces, but what did you find is the biggest challenge as one single category? Obviously, there's a lot to go over, a lot you have to evaluate, but like, was there one specific area that you felt was maybe the most complicated? Or
no, there's like so many questions that like understanding how to take the certification or how to take the assessment was probably a challenge to overcome. And this is more like, it's going to sound like gaming the system, and that's not what it is, but it kind of is. So when you're going through that process, have you seen that assessment?
I'm briefly familiar with it.
Okay. So there's like a whole bunch of questions, and then there's these specific impact areas where you drill that next level down, and that's where you kind of amplify what your score looks like in the end, really. And I didn't really understand how that worked, and I think I just didn't take the assessment in a smart way, even though I don't think my answers would have changed, but there's like there's a certain amount of like understanding that, but I mean, that's a little bit complicated. I think one of the challenges for us is, if you look at who all the stakeholders are and where we're the strongest and where we're the weakest, our governance is always pretty low. And that's because we don't have a board. So there's a lot of questions around who is your board of directors, what is the makeup of that group, and what kind of power do they have. And the last thing we want is other people trying to tell us what to do and having accountability around that, right? Like, we're all about advisory kind of people, and we tag people as we need to, but because we don't have an actual board that limits what we can do within that part of B certification. But I think the area, like in general, that most companies struggle with is the inclusiveness, diversity, equity piece, and what's cool about going through that process, right? So I don't know how many, there's like 2,500 certified companies right now, but like thousands have taken the assessment, and whether they choose not to certify or they're not certifiable, they have all that data, and they can look at it and see where is the majority of these companies falling short, and then they create basically programming around how to help you with your impacts in those areas. So the last few years, there's been a whole focus on it's like the inclusivity challenge, and they're providing a lot of best practices and small working groups and whatever to try to help everybody move those needles. But a challenge within that, a lot of it is what you're measuring, right? So you can show statistically to B-Lab, here's what my population in Grand Rapids looks like if you break it down into all the different diversity numbers, and then how does your company compare to that? And when we tried to do an initial survey with our staff just so we could provide the answer, and they were like, I'm not, this isn't any information that anyone needs to know about me, right? Like what my ethnicity is. And we had some pushback, like, okay, the last thing I want to do is offend my staff by trying to create a better company. So that was a challenge in itself. So we just bailed on all of those statistics as well. So, it's things like I would never have expected those things to be roadblocks, so to speak, but that's fine, right? I'm fine not getting those points because it's not about chasing points, right? It's about going through that process and learning from it. So those are interesting things. And then, this is not my experience, but I think a challenge that I've heard from others who have a number of investors with their company, they'll go through the whole process, and then the last step really is you change your corporate documents to state a certain legal language that you basically saying like a manager can't be fired for making a decision based on something other than profit, right? So very anti the way our legal system works. But you bake that in, and then that gives your company some protection. And we've had companies around here that the corporate attorney won't do it because it's such a foreign concept to people to not be able to fire you if you lose the company money for other reasons. I think there's a lot of fear involved in that, which is unfortunate, but yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
So any other questions, Josh, Cheyenne?
I have one more. I don't know how detailed you get into individual menu items, but is there one menu item that you found has the biggest carbon footprint?
Oh, it's totally the beef.
I would assume.
Yeah.
But is it also one of your more profitable items?
I don't know how profitable. I mean, I think it's within the profitability that we like. But we did, we calculate our carbon footprint, and I have access to a lot of great interns over here. There's a lot of schools that focus on sustainability. So I had a student a couple years ago do an analysis of what are the scope 3 impacts that we should be reporting on. So I was like, all right, we've done the carbon footprint of beer. So we knew, what some of those higher ones that wouldn't fall naturally into scope 1 or 2, like utility usage, right? So what things were potential scope 3 candidates that we should report on, and then looking at the restaurant and just, natural business operations. So anyway, so he calculated, 20, 25 different things. And the only one that made any real impact on our overall carbon footprint was our beef, the amount that we purchased. So, we're using the numbers that are out there that some study proved the carbon footprint of a pound of beef equals X. But because we're using local beef and we know they're using better practices, and I don't know the beef that you can find the accepted data is that CAFO beef or is that family farm beef, right? So anyway, I think some of those things you're limited in your data. But so even though our beef is a very high carbon footprint and impact, I think it's less high than we report on it being, I guess. Because we've chosen it wisely.
Yeah.
Though it is still beef.
We are a little bit over an hour, so I don't want to keep you too long. Do you have any final words for us? Any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
I don't think I do. I've had so many words already.
Okay, so with that said, we definitely appreciate you giving us an hour out of your day. Thank you so much for answering our questions.
Yeah.
How can our audience members find you if they are in the Grand Rapids area?
Or just look up Brewery Vivant or Broadleaf Local Beer. Yeah, and I'm the one that gets all, I mean, you would be welcome to email me directly, which is just Kris@Brewery Vivant, but any contact us form, I'm the one that answers those. So if you're ever around, let me know that you're going to be here, and hopefully I can, get you a beer.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, good luck with all your things.
Thanks. Stop recording.